Most of us, our picture of the Last Supper is shaped by Leonardo da Vinci, who gave us this painting. And we see Jesus sitting at the table, a table like our supper tables, with the disciples on his left and on his right, and he's preparing to share with them this meal. And so this is what we have in our mind, and we have in mind the Lord's Supper and how it went down. But I tell you, Da Vinci had it wrong. So I'd like for you to see in a fresh way how the Last Supper actually went down. All right? I have behind me a triclinium. A triclinium is a table. It's in a U shape. There are 3 segments to the table, and it's open in the center so that the servants can come and serve the people who are sitting at table. Now, the triclinium was low to the ground. It was something that you reclined at. So you actually sat on cushion or reclined on cushions as you sat at the table. Tri, 3-sided, clinium, from recline. Or to recline. And so you've got this picture of a triclinium. This was what a formal dining room looked like, and when you were having a formal dinner, it was held at a triclinium or eaten at a triclinium throughout the Roman Empire and in Israel. Now, we have in our mind that Jesus sat here, right? Because this is the head of the table, of course, but not in the first century. This was not the head of the table. The head of the table was here. And one reclined at this table, no shoes on. The shoes were left at the door. It was impolite to eat with your shoes on. And so one reclined. You reclined with your left arm down, and you ate with your right hand. And as you did this, the host of the dinner sat here, in this place. This was the place of honor. And then to their right and to their left were the positions of honor, the places that they reserved for those closest to them. So remember, the disciples wondered who would sit on his right hand and his left hand when he came into his glory. These were the positions of honor. Now let me remind you of a few things. It's helpful when you see this and understand this is how people ate. First of all, with the feet behind and barefoot. This helps you understand the stories. Perhaps in Luke chapter 7, when Jesus is eating at the home of Simon the Pharisee, and a prostitute comes. Do you remember this story? And she weeps at his feet while he's eating at the table. Do you see why she's weeping at his feet? Because this is the closest she could get to the supper table. When in the gospel reading last week, we found that Jesus was eating at the home of Simon the leper, and Mary, the sister of Lazarus, came and anointed his feet with oil. In John, she anoints his feet because she can't reach his head. His head is over here, his feet is here. This begins to make sense to us. When Jesus went to wash the disciples' feet, they would have turned around, and he would have washed their feet. So this is how they would have eaten this meal. Now, let me remind you, as I continue to sit here, that John's gospel tells us that Jesus says, "One of you will betray me." And as he says this, Peter sort of whispers or speaks across the table to John, who's sitting next to Jesus, and says, "Ask him who it is who's going to betray him." And the gospel writer John tells us that he, John, leaned against Jesus' breast to ask the question. Do you understand how that happened now? He's leaning against Jesus, and he's saying, "Master, which one will betray you?" That tells us that John is sitting here in one of the honored positions. Now listen to Jesus' response. "The one that I dip the sop with will betray me." Who's he going to dip the sop with? The person on his left. Who's sitting in the other honored position? Judas Iscariot.
Now the Passover meal that evening was just like every other Passover meal that Jesus had had with his disciples, but on that night he gave it some new meaning. He gave it some new significance as he ushered in the new covenant. You know, they were participating in a Passover meal similar to what thousands of others were doing that night in Jerusalem as well. But Jesus gave it new meaning. And that new meaning impacts our understanding of the Old Covenant as well as the New Covenant. It impacts our understanding of the sacrament of Holy Communion. On Thursday night at the Seder meal, as we go through the ritual there, we're going to be doing a lot of remembering of the history of how God has worked in the lives of the children of Israel in days gone by. But we're also going to remember God's faithfulness in the past, God's redemption brought through Christ, and also we will look forward to His coming again. There will be a lot of things happening very similar to what happened in that Passover meal in Jesus' day, although we won't be reclining at the table like that. But it will be a night that, as many times as I've done the Seder meal, there's always been something new that I've learned. There's always been something new, a new understanding that I've had about what was actually happening that night in the upper room. And I can guarantee you, if you come and participate in the Seder meal, there's also going to be learning that happens for you as well. Holy Week is a time when we remember the final week of Jesus' life. It begins with the celebration of Palm Sunday, and it ends with the celebration of the empty tomb. But if we only remember the celebrations, we've missed the reason for our celebration. And the reason for our celebration is because Jesus was crucified, died, and was buried. And then we celebrate the fact that the tomb was empty on Easter morn with his resurrection. So this week, let me encourage you not just to focus on the Palm Sunday celebration and the Easter celebration, but also walk with Jesus in the steps of suffering and remembering the whole story this week. As I conclude this morning, I want to share a song with you by Ray Boltz, who used his sanctified imagination to write a song about what it might have been like for a father who took his sons with him to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, the year that Jesus was crucified.